We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked Comatose, the podcast about Red Dwarf here on the We Made This Podcast Network. We are on Series 4 of Red Dwarf and we are looking at Episode 5 today. My name is Mark and I am your regular host alongside Kurt North. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, how are you?
I'm alright, I'm doing okay. How are you?
In another universe, the better part of me is doing a lot better than I am. But, we'll get into
that. Ace North.
Ace North.
I mean, Kurt's all right. He's certainly better than Rimmer.
Well, these things are sent to try us. We'll see.
But we always have a guest host, and welcome back to the podcast. Hello, Matt Latham.
Hello, thank you for having me. In another world, I pretty much didn't repeat a year, and so my alternative version is a smeghead. So.
Right. So that's not. So you're Ace Latham, and so this would be.
I'm quite offended you had to ask to me. Yes, hello.
So, yeah, we are looking at Dimension Jump, the first appearance of Ace Rimmer, and I'm going to start with a warning. Homophobia is tiresome. And I'm going to try not to be with my condemnation of it as we go through this episode. I apologise if I lay it on a bit thick, but 42 years of prejudice might do that to somebody. So sorry. If you're expecting a nice, happy episode, there may be some whining by the big gay. That would be me. Hello.
We are here to support you in all your problems and issues. So don't worry. We're here for you.
What Kurt said.
But, there's not that much. In the grand scheme of things, this is a brilliant episode and introduces one of the most iconic moments, one of the most iconic characters in Red Dwarf lore. That it's a major, major episode, and we're going to give it the love it deserves, but we're not going to kind of shirk our responsibility when it comes out to pointing out the 90s ick. Shall we get on with it, boys?
Let's do it. Down, 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 down. Sorry. I couldn't help it. I don't know why I started doing that.
Good.
We should get a new intro, in the Red Dwarf style, but more of a Top Gun style. That's what we should do.
I mean, we could, but that involves more work for Colin.
And?
Good point. Not more work for me.
Yeah.
So, we start in a greenhouse. A fucking greenhouse, which, that's not... Well, unless Red Dwarf has a greenhouse, it's big enough, isn't it?
Yeah. Should it have a greenhouse? Should it have an arboretum of some sort? Do you think? Being a mining ship?
Would an arboretum have to have, outside... Do you get, photosynthesis from sun in space?
Well, you would have, solar winds and the radiation would come through, yeah? It would be quite a lot stronger than what we get.
I'm just confused by the whole, greenhouses in space thing. Not that this was a greenhouse in space, but I've never really got the science of sci-fi because I'm not actually as bright as I kind of try to make myself look. And how do these work? Do we know how these... Could you have a greenhouse... Did they have a greenhouse in Star Trek?
Voyager did. They had to make their own.
Yeah. Yeah, they had a botanist lab or something like that, or whatever it was called. Because Kess created one, didn't she?
She did indeed.
But I mean, I'm pretty sure that you can explain it away as science or science fiction, that they've created something which simulates sunlight.
Well, even now, you've got seasonal affective disorder light bulbs, because I've got some in my work, in my projection room. Because when I first started at my work, the projection room was 70mm film. You would have 15 minutes in between each film. So there was no way of getting out of that room. And you would be in dark literally 9-10 hours a day. So I had a seasonal affective disorder bulb actually in there to sort of show daylight, so it gives you the blue light and all kinds of things to keep your circadian rhythms right. So it could do that.
So future science based on current science. All right, I can go with that. Good. But anyway, utterly irrelevant. It's not actually on Red Dwarf. It is Mrs. Rimmer looking for young Arnold. And she finds him hanging upside down from a tree, and the people who'd done that to him were his brothers, and she discusses a conversation she had with Mr. Rimmer, who had talked to his headmaster. And the conversation was Rimmer being held down a year. She says the letter and its outcome could change the whole course of his life. I really don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but bullying played for laughs is the way we start this episode.
We do. But it's bullying, but it's brother bullying, isn't it? So is that kind of just the way that siblings tend to grow up? I know that, you know, as you're in your ex-wrestling thing, I used to DDT my brother all the time. I broke his arm at one point. So
shit. I'd like to point out I did not DDT my brother or break his arm, although I did sit on his chest and slap him around the face a lot.
Yeah, because we used to have cage matches and all kinds, so the amount of injuries that we would have. And
where did you get a cage?
Do you know what it was? It was the infant school were doing some building works, and it was a weekend, and they built up Harris fencing. So we used Harris fencing as a cage match. It was fantastic. So yeah, I do get your point. I do get your point with the bullying aspect of it. And unfortunately, that's at this time of, especially, you know, that year, the years I was growing up, you know, though not necessarily hanging someone upside down, but things like that would actually happen. And it is a sibling thing. So I don't know. I can give it a little bit more leeway than I would if it was just like a school bullying.
I think it's more that it's the fact that the parent completely ignores it and treats it like it's normal, and his brothers aren't admonished is what I've actually got the problem with.
Yeah.
But Rimmer's mum was never supposed to be a good mum.
That's true.
I think a lot of the explanation could be it's the Rimmer family, and I think it's pretty much established that even if you didn't even realise who the kid was, you'd immediately realise that it was Rimmer just by the fact that he was just hanging upside down.
And I will say that the delivery of the lines that child does is brilliant. The way he says, "Oh, the fact that I'm hanging upside down," I just think it's just played brilliantly.
Oh yeah. Is it the same actor that we saw in
Alphabetti Spaghetti?
Is it the Alphabetti Spaghetti lady? And is it the what's the episode with the time slides? Time slides, fuck's sake. Well done, Mark. Is it the same Rimmer Jr. from Time Slides? And is it the same Alphabetti Spaghetti mom?
It's the same actress who played the mom.
Yeah. I think
it's Callie Greenwood. So it's the same one who appeared in Polymorph.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure on this child, if I'm honest.
No, I'm not.
I think in a weird way, and no disrespect to child actors, the mum being the same mum is probably more important than the kid being the same kid. Because depending on how much time has gone since the previous kid was Rimmer, you know, he could be 16 by now.
Yeah, yeah. And it always reminds me, and I think the next two episodes are going to be quite full of this, is that there's a lot of smeg-ups around this time. So when she actually gets her lines wrong in the smeg-ups, and she goes, "Oh, fuck," like that, and then she realises the kid's there, and he's like, "Oh, sorry." Which is great. And there's a few in the next episode as well. So it's got actually quintessential smeg-up territory. This where, you know, a lot of the smeg-ups actually sort of come to light.
It's interesting you mention the smeg-ups because there's loads of stuff that's around this time as well, because it's prime Red Dwarf time. Looking at the smegazines could be about now, because the smegazines were launched in between Series 4 and Series 5. There's just so much kind of periphery stuff for us to look at around this time as well as the main show. It's kind of like the boom period of Red Dwarf, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think the quality just, you know, we've talked about the quality so far, and it's going to be interesting to see how we finish season 4. Has been exceptional. I think it's been much better than what I thought season 3 was going to be. I thought season 3 and 4 would have been on par, but I think 4 is actually tipping it by a bit of a margin as well.
I was going to bring this up because behind the Iron Curtain, we record these in advance, so I've got no idea the reception either you've had with Colin and Carl on series 4 so far. But in the lead up to this, I pretty much ended up watching series 4 over 2 days, so Friday and yesterday. And if I'm honest, I actually think series 4 is the weakest of the 4 so far.
That's interesting.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know whether it might be the case that I've probably watched it quite the least, rewatched it quite the least. But so, I mean, particularly in the first 4 episodes before this, is that a lot of it I couldn't. The bits and pieces I remember, which are quite funny, but the overall episodes don't really stand out. Very similar to the criticism I had with Backwards, where it was a lot more, whereas like the concept's probably better than the episode is, and just contains moments rather than being a strong episode. And I remember looking at series 4 so far, and I'm like, I mean, I've forgotten DNA was in series 4. I always thought that White Hole was series 6.
Right,
yeah, and we'll get to Meltdown. I completely forgot Meltdown existed until I watched it yesterday. So, and I think it's overshadowed by 5 and 6 for me. But I'm quite interested that you think it's good. I don't know whether that's probably just me being my suggested opinion, but I've thought this was weaker than series 3.
What do you think on that, Kurt? Of the 4 series we've watched so far, which has been your favourite?
Well, I think this one, 4. But I think for me, if I can see the differences between what Matt and I look for in episodes, whereas I'm more of a concept person who enjoys the concept and enjoys the sci-fi element. So, and in the past when me and Matt have spoken, it's been, Matt, I think you tend to go for more of the emotional resonance stuff, the stuff of Rimmer and Lister and stuff like that, scare and things.
So if you think of when I came on for Thanks for the Memory, which I still think is one of my favourite episodes, I think series 2 has a lot more of the emotional character because they didn't have the budget to explore on those concepts, which is probably why I think series 2 is probably still like my favourite.
Yeah,
that we've done in this rewatch so far. Whereas the more concept based Red Dwarf is probably more appealing to you. So, but I think there's still moments of character, particularly in this episode as well. And this episode's full of like character development, character bits. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting the differences that what people get from Red Dwarf, and how different it is.
I think for me, Red Dwarf 4 is as good as I remember it being. Red Dwarf 1 and 2 are better than I remember them being, and Red Dwarf 3 wasn't as good as I remember it being. So I think 4 is my favourite, and 3 is my least favourite of what we've watched so far, which is not what I would have expected going in.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? How re-evaluation of it makes a big difference.
I can't remember which ones I've got for series 5, but I'm going to try and see if I can make an effort to watch all of series 5 before I come on for series 5, just to see and have this conversation again about how it lines up with the rest of the others as well.
I mean, my expectation of 5 and 6 is that they will be fantastic. Those series were my favourite series, and I think that's kind of not a particularly controversial opinion.
No. Well, I looking ahead at Netflix, I'm like, oh yeah, so-and-so's in that episode. So-and-so's that episode. I mean, series 5 for me is very similar to series 2 in that there's like, oh yeah, that episode's in this one. That episode's in this one.
Yeah.
So,
right, it's going to be interesting. I'm just quickly looking at season 5 now. I'm going, we're not there yet.
No, we're nowhere near there yet. We've got loads of stuff going on in between series as well, which we'll touch on later on.
I've got to edit the entire recordings of season 4 yet before we get to season 5. So, just bear with me.
We should have it done by the end of 2021.
Oh, thanks. What you mean 2021 as in like 8:21 tonight? Or
I mean, if you're that good, Kurt, get on it.
This is when he does a podcast and edits another at the same time.
I mean, I could believe that of him, to be fair.
I'm just doing it now, actually. I'm actually editing a One Division one now, right as we speak.
Good. So, 20 years later, a gold-clad space pilot lands his spaceship and gets a standing ovation. holy shit, it's Rimmer. And yeah, he's floppy-haired and quite sexy. He hugs a gentleman called Spanners, who calls him Ace, and they exchange compliments and discuss the party that he'll be skipping for pints with the engineering team. And Spanners looks quite a lot like Lister. Now, we all obviously have seen this episode quite a lot of times, but imagine the first watch of this.
I mean, even the concept of what we've got to so far with Rimmer's story, it says about being held down here. How can that make a thing? You don't realise that's a different reality till to kind of this moment. And the entrance obviously is just brilliant. You know, the fact that you've got him coming in. And there's a few behind the scenes things here that he was in the middle of British Empire at this point as well. And he was really conscious, Chris Barry was really conscious that he's playing someone who's not well liked in the British Empire. He's playing Rimmer, who's not well liked on the ship. And he wanted something to like really kind of push it. You know, I need something, give me something.
So then he goes and plays Gary Prince in A Prince Among Men, who's also not very liked.
True.
But he also like was saying, and this is something I can relate to with my other half as well, is that people, when they were saying that when he was dressed up as Ace Rimmer, were going, you know, literally were going, what a guy. You know, people were looking at him differently. He said, I can imagine what, you know, such and such would do if they're walking down a movie set wearing this stuff and, you know, being this kind of like brilliant person and stuff like that, you know, people would actually, makeup designers were looking at him going, oh, you look really shaggable, is a quote in the book that I read. Someone actually said that to him, says, oh, Chris, you look really shaggable like that. You know, so the fact that you can change so much in that scope, and the, you know, the fact that his character can be completely different, and the way he plays it as well. And just the confidence, and Chris Barry said about the confidence and the fact that when he was wearing it, he felt different as well. So it's, I think it's really good that just that whole concept works.
It's fascinating that it was a bit of a headfuck for him as much as it is for the people watching that, holy shit, Rimmer's sexy. And it's just like, imagine that the first time you see Ace Rimmer. I was so young that I can't remember it vividly, but as we saw at the Hollyhock convention that you and I went to, Kurt, there are quite a lot of young Red Dwarf fans who will be seeing this for the first time still, 30 years on. Imagine the first time you see Ace Rimmer. Yeah. How fucking brilliant is that? That's the kind of experience you can't replicate once you've lost it. You know, and
yeah.
I was too young and I'm too old now to really be able to remember it. So I'm a little bit jealous of these new Red Dwarf fans, these bloody 12-year-olds with their youth being able to experience fun things that they'll forget when they're 42. That's for you to look forward to, children.
Just look back at this episode in 30 years' time.
Empathise with my misery, child.
Yeah, and then you've got a 70-year-old Mark going,
oh,
look at all these 12-year-olds watching it in portrait on their holographic devices. In like 6D sound.
I'm a cantankerous old queen at 42. What am I going to be like at 70? Shit a brick.
Can you imagine them, like, because of Red Dwarf, the way the Red Dwarf's gone over the years, that they do a remastered version in hologram?
I'd love it. Like a 3D hologram.
It depends how good it is, though, because some of the remasters haven't been that good.
True. I mean, I've still not forgiven George Lucas for shit small trod on his tail Jabba the Hutt, so you're absolutely right. I can't believe it that Han Solo trod on Jabba's tail. Jabba would have fucking eaten his head. Anyway.
I think we've hit a nerve.
It was. I didn't like it. Right, that's the thing about Red Dwarf, is you can access both versions. If you, for some reason, like shit CGI over cool models, we've got you. You've got the DVDs, they're for you. But LucasArts never, ever released the original cut versions of the original trilogy once they'd done the remasters, so you can't access those versions. The only way you can do it is piracy of VHS rips. And why the fuck not? There's money in that. Disney, of all people, have got a product that they could make money of, and they're not.
I mean, I know this from history that the fact of Disney, and this is before Disney became the absolute mammoth that it is now. Don't get me wrong, Disney had always been a mammoth, but if you were wanting to see Star Wars, so say if my cinema decided that we're going to have a May the 4th weekend, they'd be like, no, it's not being released at the moment. Or if you want to see Beauty and the Beast, no, we're not showing any animation at the moment. You can't. We're only releasing it on the days we want it to be released, and you've got a set amount of time to release it and watch it. They're just so strict. It's the same with Beatrix Potter. The people who do Peter Rabbit, they are so strict with what you can and can't do. We had a week of when Peter Rabbit, the first film, came out. We wanted to do various different activities around it, and it was so strict, it was unreal. And that's the way that kind of media is, unfortunately, that they want to have complete control over their rights and what they want to do. And unfortunately, for things like Star Wars with the remasters and stuff, is that they're just not willing to do that. They want to have strict control and release it and make the money when they feel fit to do that.
And it's a real shame, because when in the right times, in the right places, when companies indulge their fandom, not only can they make money from it, they can make their fans happy. A couple of months ago on Right in the Childhood, I covered the Japanese anime show Cyber City Oedo 808, and there was a beautiful DVD release of that with the 3 different versions. The British version with the British dubbing and soundtrack, the American version with the British dubbing and the Japanese soundtrack, and the Japanese version with the Japanese language and the original soundtrack. So 3 different versions. The British one's great, the Japanese one's great, the American one's shite. But I still want to see the American one out of pure morbid fandom curiosity. Yeah. I had an absolute fangasm for a week watching the same thing 3 fucking times. And the Red Dwarf fans are that obsessive, and they've got access to this, which I think's great, you know?
Yep.
Sorry, that was a massive tangent.
It was, wasn't it? But it's quite enjoyable.
Listen to my other podcasts, at RATC Pod on Twitter. Anyway, he also passes a vicar, and he discusses his charity work and the drinks he's sorted with Spanners, and the vicar looks like the cat. Yeah. We've covered, oh my goodness, the cat's blood, the cat, etc., etc.
Now, supposedly, he was meant to be a cleaner, but Danny John Jules took offence to that and said, we need to be something else. So I think what they've come up with is better, because they've put him into a moral standing rather than just, cleaners are really, really important, don't get me wrong. But the fact of, at this time as well, just by making cat a cleaner wouldn't really work. So the fact that, he fought for that and said, no, I need to be something else. And they came up with this more morally right kind of character, which, if you look at the vanity aspect of cat compared to your better self, which is what they're trying to portray here, works better.
I think to some extent, potentially putting the black guy as the cleaner is an unfortunate stereotype that they were right to avoid, actually.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the cat becoming a vicar is as believable transition as Lister in a better place becomes very talented at mechanics. I'm not sure the transition is quite as believable, because the cat was quite anti-religious, when he's, cloister the stupid, nobody believes that.
I can get really pernickety about something in that. Technically, if the concept of the multiverse is happening all at the same time, I'm assuming that all this is happening at the same time as originally happened. So technically, there should not be an alternative version of the cat, or Cryon, or Holly.
Because this is 3 million years in the past. Oh shit, I didn't even think of that, Matt.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Danny John Jules, as a character that he's playing, wouldn't even exist, because it's not the same person.
Species.
Species.
Good point. Well made. Well, fuck it. Don't matter. Red Dwarf, yay.
Yeah.
Continuity be damned. So he gets to an office and flirts with Melly, the receptionist, who, for the first time, Holly's got legs. And inside the office, Oh, before that, yeah. Oh, Melly suggests that that Ace meets her in her quarters covered in maple syrup. Good. Is this something that you two heterosexual boys would enjoy?
No. Has anyone seen? Well, I know. I think Matt knows where I might be going here. Has anyone seen Alan Partridge?
Yes.
With the chocolate mousse.
Can we not?
It's.
I don't think I. I'm not sure.
Just pretend you have. Please, just pretend you have, Matt.
Yes.
When he takes.
Yes, I remember the bit with the chocolate mousse and the other thing.
It's wrong. It's wrong, Mark. And then when she suggests having sex, what's you doing, woman?
So inside the office,
I'm not a fan.
No. So inside the officer's office, he discusses parallel universes with Bongo and the dimension drive that's experimental. And Bongo looks like Crichton without the dildo head. Ace immediately takes the job to test pilot this experimental drive, even though he knows it's a one-way ticket. And then Bongo suggests that he would like to meet him in his quarters covered in tarama salata. Or hummus, whichever he'd prefer, really. And
is that something that you would like, Mark?
Right, so here's my deal. Here's my question to you. Pick someone attractive to your sexuality and your preferences. If you had to have one of these things put on you, on that person to enjoy during sex, would you prefer maple syrup, tarama salata, or hummus? Kurt, that question goes to you first.
I don't even know what the second one is.
Yeah.
But that can be part of your decision then. I mean, you could go for the mystery answer, couldn't you, Matt? Kurt is struggling. I realise this isn't a visual medium, but I'm enjoying his face right now, listeners.
Right. Has any of them got egg in? Can I be disqualified?
I think not, actually. Let's assume not.
I think, ignore the fact that it might have an egg in or not. I would go with hummus because it's probably the least messy.
Good choice. Okay, Matt, what about you? That
Maple
face.
syrup.
I really wish we were a fucking video podcast right now.
Probably maple syrup on the basis the only one I know I've had in the past.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what tarama salata is now. It is a fish-based dip that you put your crisps in or your pita bread in. It's kind of continentally type situation. And I really like it.
My answer remains.
Yeah.
My answer remains.
I really like it, but veggie now, so that one's completely disqualified. So it's between maple syrup and hummus for me. And I think it'd be a lot more effort with maple syrup because it's sticky. So yeah, I'd probably go with hummus as well. Did you enjoy that sideline, boys?
Yeah. We've had worse. Oh, I've had worse. Unfortunately, I'm on every episode with you, so I have to go through all of them. These people that come on again now and again during every season, they get a bit of a lottery.
Depends on the mood, Mark's in.
I feel like when something like this is gifted to me, it would be wrong not to torture you, Kurt.
It's fine. I'm used to it now. I made my bed after lying it now. It's almost just over a year ago we started this. So.
There's only 12 series, mate. We're about a third of a way through. Good work. So they get to the launch bay and he waves goodbye and smoke me a kipper. I'll be back for breakfast. That is the line, isn't it?
That's the line. I mean, talk about quotable dwarf. The Red Dwarf fandom, full stop. In my childhood, the lot was smoke me a kipper.
Yeah.
There's not, as I say, I think I mentioned this before in previous episodes about, there wasn't that many people that were watching Red Dwarf in my friendship group, but smoke me a kipper was within the school. It was that big. And, the t-shirts that, you know, with Ace on it. It's just, that is like a lot, especially around that time, was the thing that Red Dwarf was known for.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's for that exact reason that it isn't really that quotable for me, because it was too obvious. I don't feel like it was like something that maybe I did as a kid, but not for a long, long time, that continued with me as I got older and is still there, like a lot of the other stuff that we've discussed in the past. But it is the most iconic line in Red Dwarf. I don't think there is anything else more iconic or more immediately Red Dwarfy than that, unless either of you two think that there is anything that contend with it. Smeghead, true.
I think Smeghead's like. I think the only reason I know the word Smeg or Smeghead is because of Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd argue that's probably the contribution to society.
And what a contribution it is.
The biggest contribution to society is smegma, or is the awareness of smegma, rather than smoked kippers, I think.
I'd argue that anyone with a penis is aware of smegma, but perhaps wouldn't know its name if it wasn't for Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
We just had a conversation about smegma. Shall we move on? So we finally get to our Red Dwarf. We're about 7 or 8 minutes in, and we haven't actually seen any of the boys from the dwarf. And they're in the quarters. Lister and Crichton attempt to sneak past Rimmer for a fishing trip on a nearby ocean planet. Cat arrives, and Rimmer is upset that they tried to go without him. And I think it's important that it's, to me at least, that even people who are actually his friends these days are still bullying Rimmer, because excluding people from a friendship group is explicitly bullying. And I can tell you that because that is in my manual for scout leading. Don't let kids exclude other kids from scouting and friendship groups. So I just wonder whether that was considered bullying in 1991. What do you two think?
Yes, I think it is. You get the point that if Rimmer's not there, they probably enjoy the holiday a lot more, considering that earlier in the series that Rimmer was showing them like slides of basically diesel tanks.
Yeah.
So they probably wanted a diesel tank slide free holiday. But on the other hand, it is like there is kind of like the idea that yes, okay, you've got those friends that probably that you probably don't connect with as much as other members in the friendship group, but you can't just explicitly exclude them. If anyone disagrees with that, then you're probably the friend that that disagrees them from. So yeah, it's one of those. I think it's not. I think particularly at the time as well, and probably the age, you don't notice it because I think they have that established relationship with Rimmer anyway, so you fully understand why they wouldn't want to go with the person who tried to once take over Lister's body.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I think there's also an element of, in 2021, it is completely recognised that adults can and do bully adults. Whereas perhaps around the 90s when I was at school, bullying was associated with juvenile rather than actually something that continued once you hit adulthood. Again, I know you're a little younger than me, Matt, but Kurt, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say that, definitely. Yeah, it's...
I don't know. I can't remember if there's an actual name for the character type. There's a character type which I've always referred to for nearly 2 decades now, called the Eric Cartman character, who's usually, and there's probably an actual TV trope article with the actual name on, where, I mean, particularly in comedy, that they're there to explicitly generate conflict and antagonism.
Yeah.
And Rimmer is the Eric Cartman of Red Dwarf. I like Sheldon Cooper's probably another one, in a similar vein, and where like you constantly question how they remain friends with them, but despite their actions in some episodes, I think South Park has found ways of addressing that kind of thing better than Red Dwarf has, admittedly. But yeah, and I think mainly because I think Eric Cartman is like about 1,000,000 times worse than Rimmer is as a person. But it's that kind of like there's a friendship group, and there's the one character, particularly to generate conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The metaphor is strong with Eric Cartman, so regardless of what its proper name is, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's annoying me now. It's one of those concepts that always jumps out like immediately in new. If I watch something new, you'll find the character that will generate conflict or the most likely to cause conflict. And it is Rimmer in Red Dwarf, and I think, I think it come up in the first series, like Rimmer's there because it's to keep Dave Lister sane. And I think we've talked about this, whether if it was someone else other than Rimmer to keep a balance, then they have to, emotionally, it keeps Lister grounded in that he's got someone who's got he's got the capacity of a multi-layered relationship with, of not just being a friend, but someone who's also antagonistic with. Whether it was something like Peterson or someone he's used with, he would just be pissed.
Yeah, true.
The whole time.
And I think the other aspect to bear in mind as well is that sitcoms are by design actually done in a way that it's a hyper realization or hyper real story.
Yes,
so the fact that you've got to pull that character trait out, but you've got to pull it out quite significantly to get that. So yes, there would be elements of like something that's maybe a bit smaller than that within a group. Oh, you didn't tell me about that. Why didn't you tell me about that? Which is not as much as like you didn't tell me you were going on holiday. There's a bit of like a balance that way as well. So I agree that you probably wouldn't write this as much nowadays as you would then, but I think you have to have conflict in a story to be able to move things on.
Yeah, and Rimmer does say that he's tried to get on with them, and Lister does renege and says, "Yep, of course you can come fishing with us," because he does the right thing, despite the fact. And this is the difficult thing about this element of bullying. He clearly, genuinely doesn't want Rimmer to come on this particular instance. It's not that he's chosen to actively be unpleasant to Rimmer. It's more that he's been selfish. And I think a lot of people don't get their head around how bullying is still bullying if you're looking after number one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking from a personal perspective that I once went on holiday. Well, it wasn't actually me. No, that's a lie. I didn't go on holiday, but, there was a holiday group of friends. I didn't go. And there was one person that did, that went in my place, who is, someone who, he's a difficult character. He's brilliant, but when he goes too far, he goes too far. And they reneged me with stories of like, he was a nightmare being on holiday with, because he's just that character. It's like you can deal with him in, small segments, but being stuck on a holiday for 15 days with him, they really, really struggled, to the point where they had to leave him at one point because he was just getting that, just het up in his own kind of whirlwind. So there is real life things that would happen in a group, in a circle of friends, that things like that would happen.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting just thinking about things like that, where I can imagine being on holiday with this particular person and it would be a nightmare. It would absolutely be a nightmare. On the flip side, there's a friend that I went on holiday with in the same group of friends, different people. We realized everything, and it's something I didn't realize about him, everything revolved around food. It was, when we get to the airport, we're going to have food. When we get to on the plane, wonder what we're going to have for food. When we get off the airport, we're going to go to the taxi. We're going to get there, we're going to have some food. We'll wake up in the morning, we'll go for breakfast. It's like, will you stop it? And I tried to tell somebody, says, look, watch him. And then for the next 2 or 3 days, all I could see is like him going, so, we'll go into town. We'll go and have that, go to the pub down the road, and we'll get a meal there. And they're just going, oh God. So, but yeah, character traits, it's an interesting subject.
And I think there's something to be said about friendship groups with things in common. And it's touched on in the episode where Rimmer wants to know why he can't find friends who are into telegraph poles, Hammond organs, and Morris dancing. And whilst I'm not into those three things, I might argue that my tastes are a little bit niche too. I don't think I've found anyone else who's into podcasting, board games, and scouting at the same time, but I don't think I need someone like that. I think that person would actually drive me crazy.
You do that all at the same time. So you,
I mean,
I'm editing the podcast right now, but are you actually scouting as we speak? Or
I've done two of those things at the same time. I've done board gaming with my scouts, and I've done podcasting with my scouts, but I haven't done podcasting and board gaming at the same time. So maybe that's my new podcast idea, Kurt.
Oh, God, no.
Oh, God, Kurt, you started him off already. At the moment, I keep getting whenever a podcast Twitter account says, "Oh, so-and-so's followed you," immediately I assume it's Mark, and it usually is.
That's not fair. It's not. Sometimes it's Kurt.
Oh, man.
Oh, I've lost my track now because you distracted me with more podcasts. Matt, it's your fault.
We're 45 minutes into this podcast, but we're about 7 minutes into the episode.
All right, I'll get on it. So, Rimmer does some backseat driving, and it's funny. And in the back, Lister and Kat are discussing how they're disappointed that Rimmer's actually coming with them. Kat is completely right when he accuses Lister of being two-faced, but he's then two-faced himself. Hypocrisy is a beautiful thing when it comes to comedy.
Yep.
Rimmer comes in the back and offers to put on some Hammond organ music, and then he suggests campfire songs. But before it gets worse for everybody, there's a purple alert and a time anomaly. So, purple alert. Does that involve changing the bulb?
Not in this particular ship, no. They don't have a bulb in the cockpit.
I don't know. I wonder whether if this was deliberate, that they were kind of like planning on gags around the different kinds of alert, because basically they quite constantly take the piss out of Star Trek. And this was just sowing a seed for that very iconic thing. I wonder.
Potentially.
And
what I will say is, what I will say in the episode, just before we move on, when he starts singing Kumbaya, I just lose it. I just absolutely, I was saying, doing campfires. Kumbaya. It's just like so comically brilliant timing. I love it.
As a scout leader, I'd like to point out his lyrics are fucking wrong. They are not the lyrics of Kumbaya. Damn it. And I think that was deliberate as well. And it worked because it got a reaction, didn't it? Bloody clever writers being clever and using the shitty character to wind people up. It's almost like they're good at this shit.
It's like make a good comedy show, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So Crichton can't change course, and they're going to collide with whatever's coming out of the anomaly. And Rimmer panics, and they all try and calm down by reading the in-flight magazine, which I thought was fucking hilarious.
Okay, so just going back to Hollyhop, which I'm glad happened. I had a bit of a I had a bit of a Rimmer moment during the quiz when they were talking about geography, and they were talking. They had 9 questions on geography, and the questions came in, and I was like, Belgium. And I think out of the 9 questions, I might have answered like 4 or 5 of them as Belgium. And I got one right, Air Belgium. But they mentioned Belgium in here as well.
They do.
So I was like, that made me chuckle when I watched it this afternoon.
There's a lot of random geography disses in Red Dwarf, which is why they had that whole geography section on the quiz at Hollyhop, I think. And it was, Belgium gets a tough gig everywhere, not just Red Dwarf. And I've been to Belgium. It was quite nice.
So what did he make to the air crash actual, the procedures and stuff? And obviously Rimmer's the one that ends up being the one that survives of all of it. But just the fact that he's got the procedures and said, aren't we supposed to be getting behind someone that carries a baby and stuff like that? I just thought it was brilliantly done.
Yeah, it was very clever.
I quite like that, and I like the kind of model work and the actual effects of the ship crashing.
Yeah,
as well. So the model works great, particularly with the impact and stuff. I did wonder how many times has Starbug crashed so far.
Quite a lot, and it's not going to end either.
Yeah,
and you wonder how many Starbugs they had to repair. Quite a lot. Quite a lot of Starbugs.
They've got to be on
I
conveyor
wonder who
belt.
repaired them. It's Scutters, wouldn't it?
Yeah, get the Scutters to do it. Good point. Cat is very heavily injured, but is more concerned about his outfit. Crichton has to snap the bone back in, and he doesn't even notice it because he's reading said previously mentioned in-flight magazine. I loved how Holly was wonky on the screen. As nice touches go, that was fucking brilliant. They didn't need to do that, but it was so subtle, yet so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, she's pretty wonky anyway inside. To actually put a wonky on the screen, brilliant. Brilliant.
Later on in the episode, she gets to stand up to create a fall, which wasn't originally in there.
Right.
Also, that's something to mention as well, which was mentioned in Hollyhop actually, but has been mentioned elsewhere. I think it's a story that comes up regularly. Everyone gets to say "what a guy" except for her. Melly doesn't say it.
Oh, Devode. I hadn't clocked that, but you're right. So they're in a bog and they're going to sink unless they fix the engine. And oh shit, there's a gale force wind outside. Suddenly, Ace appears in the ship and tells his computer he's going to help despite the danger. So that's the two kind of things finally explicitly meeting each other. And then Ace goes to Starbug and introduces himself. Holly faints, which I think's wonderful.
Yeah, as I say, that wasn't even in the script. It was something that Hattie had said. There's not much for Holly to do in this episode. We've got to surely make her meet him at some point or do something. And then she's the one that suggested that what if she just like faints? So hence the reason why she's had to stand up to be able to create the effect of her going, which is one of my favourite moments of hers. I love that.
It's
moment.
wonderful.
I just love it.
Ace explains the reason he's there and suggests that they follow Rimmer's plan to fix the engine, and Rimmer doesn't have a plan. Ace suggests a two-man job, and Lister offers, and Ace is like, whoa, wait for Rimmer, and Rimmer's like, no. And I like how Ace assumes that Rimmer's going to be brilliant because he's brilliant. And if there are any character flaws of Ace, it's perhaps assumptions like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He also has got a slight flaw, but I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this because it's kind of a continuity thing, but I'm quite happy to say it's a flaw. That he said, Lister goes, but no, he's a hologram. He can't touch anything. Oh, wait a second. Rimmer was just going to volunteer. It's like, you've just been told he's a hologram. He's not going to volunteer because he can't touch anything.
Oh, yeah, that's a bit dopey. I hadn't thought about that. Unless, of course, Ace assumed that he was Hardlight, even though we hadn't encountered Hardlight yet.
Yeah, maybe they had Hardlight 3 million years before this episode takes place.
Maybe Ace created Hardlight in his universe. We don't know.
Well, it sounds like he's created quite a few bits of Hardlight, to be honest with you.
Lol.
What a guy. What a guy.
So, Ace continues to assume that Rimmer is remarkable, and he's just crap whenever Ace encounters him. And it's kind of sad, really, that they're both kind of deluded in a weird way. And yeah. I guess that's quite subtly a continuity that makes them quite similar to each other, even though they are so extreme versions of themselves, you know?
Well, here's a question for you then. If thinking back to over the past 30 to 40 years that you've been alive.
Oh, shit.
And there'd been a different, say, just purely a different path that you could have taken, what path do you think you would have been along? So what fork in the road would you have changed, and potentially where would you be right now if had it not been for the things that have set you off in this motion?
I think for me, it would be something along the choices I made for career direction as a kid. So actually quite similar to Rimmer, something in school that kind of changed my life completely. I decided with 100% certainty at around 12, 13, 14 that I wanted to be an English teacher. And I did my A-levels focused on that. I did my literature degree focused on that. And then I did a PGCE, and without wishing to be too dramatic about it, it gave me a nervous breakdown. And I think as something that was pivotal in my life, everything I'd focused my everything on going to shit, perhaps if I hadn't focused on that and I focused on something else that I was then successful at, might have made me a very different person. But I'm all right with who I am. I think in a lot of ways I'm the ace, because, you know, Ace had a lot of disappointment that then changed the trajectory of his life. And I wonder if I'd have been a dickhead if I got everything I wanted. I don't know.
What about you, Matt?
This is something I've given loads of thoughts of before, mainly because I'm quite one of my big kind of interest in fiction is parallel universes and the concept of alternate realities and stuff. So yeah, like, which is why I suddenly, when someone told me, "Oh, this happens in Fringe season 3," I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm going to have to watch that." One of the reasons I really love Sliders, and also I will defend Sliding Doors to the death, because I think it's a great concept, and I'm really shocked that no one has even bothered to think, "Oh yeah, why don't we make an anthology TV series based on the concept of Sliding Doors?" Because I'd watch the hell out of that.
I liked the song by Aqua.
That's brilliant. That song's brilliant.
I've only seen Sliding Doors once, but I remember the song by Aqua was a banger.
Oh yes, the song's amazing.
I mean, you can imagine it. Let's say Russian Doll, for example. It's a different concept, but you can imagine a Russian Doll version of Sliding Doors. I could.
Yeah. I think I quite like the idea of a split decision changing life in different ways. The one for me is, and I know what it would have been, is that I can remember I was in year 6, and I can remember like it's a choice of secondary school, and there was one secondary school quite local to me that I thought, I'd really like to go to there. And so for my friend and my like good friend, close friend in like years during primary school was going as well. But I know my mum and dad wasn't much of a fan of the school when they went to see it. And then there was another school that my mum and dad was a lot more, they liked a lot more, and was slightly the other way, but there was a few there. And I remember my mum saying, and because it was on the border of West Midlands and Staffordshire, you had to apply differently. And I remember people saying, "Oh yeah, you're not going to get into that school." All right, then. And me, mum, coming to my bedroom once when I was playing on my Amiga and going, "Oh, you've gotten into so and so. So do you want to go to that school or do you want to go to that one?"
Right.
And the choice is yours. And I'm like, okay, so I can go to the one school which I kind of wanted to go to, but that my friend was going to. And or I can go to the other one, and I went to the other one. I didn't go to the one that was in Staffordshire. I went to the one that was in Walsall, and I often wonder like what would have happened if I would have gone to that, because I think a lot of formative events and instances that made me who I am today, and also basically like affecting, and also had like massive effects on like my self-confidence when I was a teenager happened was I was at school. And I often wonder what would have happened if I was at the other one, and I would have been a much different person, guaranteed.
It's fascinating that we've both gone for school-based decisions, and the episode focuses on a school-based decision as well. And I think that that's kind of an important message, that it's easy to fuck up a kid.
Yeah.
A slight tangent. One of the things, particularly with talking about the school stuff, is that one criticism of teenage drama that I think is incredibly lazy and is unfair is people saying, "Oh, it's teenage problems. Teenage problems. They're just dull. They don't know what real problems are." But I've always had the assumption that, yeah, but teenage problems will affect you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And sometimes TV shows might be the teenagers might be like the daughters of and sons and daughters of billionaires, but then you've got ones where the sons and daughters of people from the council estate. They're still valid problems that are worth exploring. So
yeah, it's interesting because mine would be slightly older than that because I'm strangely enough, we were talking about this in the Xcast episode of Monday, which we were talking about recently. And, I'm not one that goes and naturally thinks about these things. You know, so if Carl asks us a question saying, you know, when you think back to stuff, do you think about how things could have been? And I was like, well, I don't think that way. That's not the way I think. I think of just that happened, you know, rather than what it could have been. But I think the one moment that I can imagine if I thought about it in more detail would be, I went straight after sixth form. I went straight into work, and I then spent about a year, well, not even that, maybe 6 months before I got into my first major job, which was I was there for 7 years, and they were cutting back stuff, and there was an option, there was a choice where I could have potentially gone to work in Liverpool, and it was that decision. I think that decision for me would have irrevocably changed how I would have worked. Because if I'd left at that point to go work in Liverpool, I probably would have left everything behind. And I think for me, it would have been a case of talking about your friendship thing, talking about what we were talking about earlier on with people seeing you in certain ways, or maybe personally for me, not being myself as much as I'd like to be. I'm still a bit like that now. There's elements of like things on Facebook I won't post because I can't be bothered. You know, whereas like, had it been because I know certain friends would be like, oh, do this. Oh, look, Kurt's doing that. And I'm like, I don't want to listen to you talking about that. So there's elements that like I kind of restrain myself in certain aspects. But I think had I moved to Liverpool, I might have been a bit freer to develop friendships around what I wanted to do more than the friendships I've actually built up while I was a kid. So I think that freedom, if I went to Liverpool, would have been really interesting, moving forward. So mine's slightly different. And my choice was to go to Liverpool or to transfer to another role in the city. And I transferred to another role in the city. And then within 6 months, I was working in the job I'm in now. So, and then 15 years have now passed. So it's just really strange how that to me was my sliding doors moment. It's just that option of moving out of the city I live in to a big city, to a city with got millions of people in rather than 800,000 people.
I think I'd like to point out that I don't regret everything that happened as a kid and got me to where I was, where, you know, it wasn't a nice time when I did my PGCE, but the fact that I did fail at something that had always been what I wanted to do kind of helped me assess who I wanted to be as a person. It helped me come out the closet. And I don't know. I don't think I would change it. But the answer to your question is, where do you think your pivotal moment was? And that was it. I don't think I would want to change it, though.
Yeah. I wouldn't be here now talking about, it might be. You don't know, do you? But yeah, it is interesting just how it almost, sometimes for me, it feels like I'm where I am now, but I could have been there earlier if I'd gone a different path. So
maybe.
And it's really interesting.
We've had the conversation about what you'd do if you met alternative reality you, haven't we? So should we move on?
Yeah.
Maybe there's an alternative reality where I've did something earlier about losing my hair and I've still got hair.
What, like a spray can?
No, but my dad is...
Toupee?
No, well, maybe. My dad's convinced that because I used to tie back my long hair, that it kind of exaggerated the kind of recede of my hair. I'm not sure that's science, but my dad's absolutely convinced. So maybe if I didn't tie back my long hair when it was wet, maybe there's a kind of 40-year-old me with luscious locks still.
What, like rimmers?
Maybe.
Basically.
Oh, I could have a rimmer floppy hairdo. Good times.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's very 90s as well, isn't it? The hairdo itself. The actual hairdo itself is very,
not the
very
curtains,
90s.
though, so it's not as 90s as it could be.
The curtains.
Curtains weren't round yet.
True, they weren't. But, fucking...
Nick Carter didn't turn up yet.
Curtains. Moving on. Crichton talks to Ace and says that he can't let him execute this plan because he's got a broken arm, and Ace knocks him out.
Right. Question.
Yes.
Quick one. Very quick one. It links in with Meltdown. Meltdown wasn't the original end episode. It was actually the first episode because there was allusions to the Gulf War, so they didn't want to put it at the beginning.
Yes.
So they moved it around. This episode got moved around a little bit as well. But it is quite uncanny that they talk about him not being waterproof in this episode. The next episode, he ends up in a shower soaking wet.
Ah, shit. That's a bit of a continuity episode, isn't it?
I forgive him for it because programming moved around, so it's not a thing. But it's the episode directly after he ends up soaking wet in a shower.
And it's funny, so...
Also, also, there's like, isn't it, Crikey TV Series 8, where he's actually based on the fact that he's showering with the female inmates.
Right, but he does have an umbrella in that. He wears his umbrella.
I can't remember.
Crikey TV. Season 8 is one of my favourites. I keep saying this. Season 8 is actually one of my favourites.
I think it's underrated, mainly because Series 7 was not
Shite.
very good. Yes, shite.
I know Matt will probably argue the point, but we'll move on.
So eventually we get Ace and Lister fixing Starbug. When Lister falls, Ace helps him up with his broken arm. I mean, what a guy. And and then they start singing Rasta Billy Skank. Inside, Cat is delirious and quoting Bad Fashion, which made me howl. I enjoyed that immensely. And then we get to the problematic stuff. Do we want to talk about nice stuff before I have my rant?
I think if we've got nice stuff to talk about, we'll leave it to the end.
All right. So, Rimmer hates Ace and suggests he wears women's underwear, which is the start. And there is nothing wrong with wearing women's underwear if you want to. Move on from that. Lister and Ace return and do a victory dance, sing each other's praises, and Rimmer is, well, this hasn't aged well. It gets to the point where it's heavily suggested that all gay men are paedophiles.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, that was the easy way of reinforcing Section 28, which I suffered through as a teenager. And this hit me really, really hard. And what I have done, which I will touch on a little bit later, is I've reached out to other LGBT people, particularly in the Red Dwarf fandom, to try and get my head around how I feel about this. And that did really, really help. But ball gowns and whipping boys, it's really distasteful. And Crichton calls him on it, but not well enough, would be my opinion on that. So it is called on, but in a kind of 90s, oh, it's only Rimmer kind of way, which, again, hasn't aged well. And, yeah. That's all I'm going to say for the time being. I think we're going to move on to another scene unless anyone else wants to...
I do want to touch upon something around it, but not necessarily pointing out to the point that you... I completely, absolutely agree with you. Things like even things after the fact come into it, like sort of the kangaroo line, which doesn't help.
No.
But the one thing I would like to generally talk about is the state of mind of Rimmer as opposed to the actual content of what was said. Because the way Rimmer is so against everything, that he's so pushing back against it, that he's he just doesn't want to face the fact that there's a better version of him. And if you take everything out of context, his actual mind of that I'm just trying to do everything to distance myself from that. In itself, it can be a discussion on psychology. And as I say, I don't want to touch upon the trigger points. I'd rather just talk about his state of mind at that point. I'm just wondering what your thought was on the fact that he's he's reacted in such a bad way because of what he perceives as, as jealousy or whatever that may well be.
And it's absolutely right. It is natural that someone would lash out like that. I think I'm going to go into the conversation I had with Dan, or better known as Pendo, from the official Red Dwarf fan club. Ace isn't homophobic. When Bongo approaches him, he says, "Sorry, mate, not for me." Perfectly acceptable. So we had a conversation about how Ace is better educated and in a better place personally than Rimmer, so he's more likely to be a more enlightened and, the best version of who that person could have ever been. And so he doesn't rise to anything that Rimmer says, because in a lot of ways he understands that could have been him, and he could have ended up being, well, frankly, an insecure, miserable, bitter, homophobic piece of shit. But I think the resentment, like you say, it's taken out on others, and it isn't specifically that he's homophobic, it's that homophobia is all he knows to be able to insult, which again is actually very, very 90s. So in a kind of strange way, it can be argued that this actually advocates education and living your best life.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Definitely, I think that makes me pass it more than I would have thought about. But yeah, it definitely feels like it's more of a, as you say, the 90s aspect of it. Of that is something that's a defense mechanism that people use, and it's just interesting that they go down that route. And as you say, I didn't think of the Ace aspect. I didn't think of the point of view of Ace. It's an interesting discussion to have psychologically on, as you say, the defense mechanisms and what is perceived at that point to be, derogatory terms, which is completely wrong. I'm not saying it is right or anything at all, but it's just the way that it feels like that culture is the way that people would express that, and the education thing's definitely something that needs to be thought and considered.
We've seen so many times that Rimmer has the capability of not self-deprecation, that's so much of a low self-esteem that he will do anything to basically damage it himself. And again, I think the lack of it I think if the same thing was happening in a more modern series, then you would have had an extension of the conversation between perhaps Lister and Crichton, talking to Rimmer saying, "No, you can't say what you just said." But I think the extreme nature, and I don't think culture in 1991 was far enough to be self-aware that I think that what things Rimmer was saying was the most extreme things he's probably said about something to combat the complete opposite. So because at the moment, if you think of Better Than Life, where he was seeing himself achieving well, he ended up self-sabotaging himself. And then you see Ace Rimmer, which is a lot more of a personal mirror to what he could have been. He goes for the extreme. He goes for the extreme in order to kind of comprehend in his head. And I think the episode fails a bit on that. It doesn't really take him to task on that.
It's an odd one, because obviously the best version of me is out and comfortable with who and what I am. But Rimmer never comes out as gay later on, so it isn't that. As much as you could maybe suggest that he's still in the closet, I just don't think, certainly with more modern writing, that homophobia would be considered something that is likely to continue that far into the future. But it's indicative of its time. And sorry, go on, Matt.
And so I'll say I don't think Rimmer can probably comprehend himself ever having that kind of close platonic relationship with other straight men. So as soon as he thinks, he's too pally with people, immediately his mind goes to the worst depths it can. So I don't think he's aware that capable. If that makes sense.
And it's not an unrealistic portrayal of the attitudes of people in the 90s. What I think is important for me to emphasize is that I don't believe that there really is a huge amount of true hate out there. The vast majority of homophobia and racism and any other unpleasantness is through ignorance, and people can learn. And the major problem I have with this is that there is no learning and there is no consequences for Rimmer. But it doesn't alter the fact that this was kind of a realistic portrayal of what 90s society was. And again, science fiction is indicative of its time. But I think you should also look at what you're trying to understand about why Rimmer is the way he is. He is a bitter, resentful, damaged man. And bitter, resentful, damaged people are likely to start to have prejudices.
Yeah.
However fair or unfair they may or may not be. And I think, going back to what I said, this does taint this episode for me. It couldn't not, because there are some very, very unpleasant things for anybody, let alone someone who went through Section 28's horror. But it really did help talking to someone like Pendo, who kind of calmed me down and gave me an alternative perspective that wasn't rage and was a bit more reasonable. And let's be honest, the lad's maybe 10 or 12 years younger than me, so he's lived in a better society and perhaps a little more moderate than this grumpy, jaded old queen. And sometimes perhaps I need that in my life. Moving on, in the quarters, Rimmer asks Kat how Kat is, and Lister says that Ace has saved his leg. Rimmer resents Ace, and they discuss what the one decision difference might be, and Rimmer suggests that Ace got all the breaks he didn't get, which is really important, and we'll come back to it. Ace told Lister about spanners, and Lister isn't so bothered. He's like, cool, good for him. And I think that's really indicative of the difference between the characters of Lister and Rimmer, is that Lister's comfortable in his skin and Rimmer is not.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to bring up in the scene where Lister invites Rimmer is that I think Lister has a lot more of a self-awareness of himself and his kind of flaws, in that immediately he knows he was kind of selfish and he invites Rimmer along, and kind of accepting of that, and it kind of matches his reaction to spanners. So, like, as much as we've seen in the past, where he's kind of he's seen alternative versions with Kochanski already. So like when he goes, oh yeah, there's another version who's married to Christine Kochanski, and I'm happy for them. And stuff. But then I think Lister's a lot more. He's a lot more able to kind of be accepting of what he is and where he is. I mean, occasionally he does crack with space loneliness, but he's a lot more at peace with himself.
Yeah.
Where on the flip side, we've seen that Rimmer isn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's nice being comfortable in your own skin. And it's also nice acknowledging how difficult it is to get there. It's important to do that. And I do try and help anybody who is struggling with their own sexuality to get to the stage I'm at. But I'm still not perfect, and things do still trigger me. And, that's also okay. Absolutely. I wish I was as comfortable in my skin as the character of Lister is, but he is just a fucking character, Mm-hmm. So Ace is stitching up his own arm, and he tells Lister that he's leaving because he can't stand how Weasley Rimmer is. And to be fair, even the perfect version of Rimmer has a line, and it turns out that it's Rimmer. So,
I'd be very interested to compare that to, is it Start Me a Clipper in Series 7?
Yes.
About, at least, and compare Ace then to now with his opinion of Rimmer, but we'll get to that.
We aren't going anywhere. We've got loads to do.
Yeah.
So Lister asks where he'll go, and Ace says he's going to travel through all the other realities. And Lister tells him to go easy on Rimmer as he didn't get Ace's break. Now, this is where it's really, really important. And again, similar thing with what Matt and I discussed about what we thought our breaks may or may not have been. Ace tells him that Rimmer thinks he did get the break because the break that Ace actually got was being held back a year, whereas in Rimmer's head, he got the good thing in that particular situation. And that's so fucking fascinating. And it really made me think about my perception of what breaks actually are. And I think, yeah, I'm trying. I can't get my head around it. Can either of you put it a bit better than me?
I think the concept of a break in the context of what we're saying is a stroke of good luck that you seize upon. Whereas, and I think that if you go through life thinking that the only things you're going to see are the only things that will make you are just the good things that happen to you, then I think that's the concept. I think that's what Rimmer thinks of. And I think the fact that he never had that I don't think he's had a setback as bad as that, or what he perceives to be as bad as that. So whenever he has his stroke of bad luck, he just thinks it's him being... I think with Ace Rimmer, I think it's the difference of being proactive and reactive. Whereas I think Rimmer's idea of breaks being proactive of things or what happens to you, I think Ace has learned to be reactive. So because he was held back, he realised I need to kind of toughen up. I need to take what's happened and learn from it. So the mistakes that I've made, I need to think, okay, what have I done? I need to learn from it and never happen again. Whereas Rimmer just goes, right, okay, that's happened. Right, that's happened.
Yeah,
I'm a goit.
Exactly right.
And just doesn't have the capability to realise that the mistake you've made, you learn from it and don't make it again. So, like, next time you get invited for gazpacho soup, you know it's cold, rather than just panic.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head there, and you've articulated it better than my blither. So well done, Matt.
But there's also the fact that you've got Rimmer equates. Like, in everything he does, he's got to pass his Navi exams. He has to pass it. He has to physically see it on paper as that is what people perceive it to be. If you pass your A-levels and you get a high-paying job, brilliant. That's what success is. And he can't equate anything of that. He's so narrow-minded in that everything has to have a goal. Everything has to be attainable, that you get a pass mark and you do it. And that's not how life works.
No, you're absolutely right. Rimmer, in the weirdest way, is actually more of an idealist than Ace.
Yeah.
But he also completely relies on good luck rather than taking responsibility for his own actions, mistakes, and failures. And that's why Rimmer is such a miserable character, is he can't get out of the rut that he's created for himself, and that makes him the way he is.
I want to make a point, but I can't make it because it refers to things that Mark hasn't seen yet.
Oh, go ahead. I'll forget next by the end of the episode.
You can talk to me, Matt. Talk to me.
Okay. Okay. So, for example, out of time, only the good, at least two of several instances where Rimmer has navigated around that and pretty much shown characteristics of Ace. And I think we'll get to the point where we'll start seeing the show kind of struggle to develop Rimmer anymore, because he kind of has his end. He has his kind of natural character arc end more than once. So it happens at the end of season 6. It happens at the end of season 8. It might happen again in other times. So I think what this episode does, I think it shows that what Rimmer does in future episodes isn't exactly out of character for him. So I am thinking of like at the end of Out of Time, where he's pretty much almost self-sacrificing. And him kind of, and what he does in Only the Good, even though it kind of ends with him being a bastard again. But but I think. I don't think that. I know I've seen people say, yeah, it's a bit out of character for him, but I think without Ace Rimmer, you'll never understand that the foundation of him being able to do that is there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ace is important, very important when it comes to Red Dwarf lore and the progression of the Rimmer character and who Rimmer could be and actually eventually becomes, spoilers. And so, yeah, I think as episodes go, it's important. It was just a little bit of a tough watch for me. Let's get it finished. Ace is leaving and Rimmer has attempted to use a scooter to prank him. The prank fails, and then there's a scroll which says, in the decades that followed, Ace Rimmer searched countless realities and met thousands of different Arnold Rimmers. However, he never encountered an Arnold Rimmer as deeply sad and worthless as the one he'd met aboard Red Dwarf. His impossible search continues.
So the original ending was that the Kippers did fall. And they cut it out because they didn't feel it felt right. So they put the scroll in instead.
But wasn't the plan that the Kippers would fall onto our Rimmer? And then people were like, yeah, but wouldn't they just fall through him? And I think apparently the original, because I think the ending's actually filmed where he just has all the Kippers fall on top of him, and then people going, no, I think there might be some people sad enough to realise that they should have gone through him.
No, yeah, I think they made the right choice. I do think they made the right choice.
It's the same out of, like, if someone's out of phase, why don't they fall through the floor gag through any kind of sci-fi. Which I think actually it's brought up in one of the Stargate episodes, I think, where they take the piss. I think it's Wormhole Extreme, where they take the piss out of science fiction stuff, and one of the characters goes, "If I'm out of phase, why don't I fall through the floor?" And the writers just look at each other and going, and just shrug, and just shrug.
I've been playing Star Trek Online again recently, and at certain times, say for example, because it's online, you get the sometimes you'll get the character like doesn't respond to what you're doing, and he'll just start hovering. You can just, I just want someone to do that in a comedy like Red Dwarf would do, where the hologram just all of a sudden just stops and just starts floating like along the corridor, maybe just like 6 inches off the floor, or like 6 inches below the floor, and just kind of go through it. That would be great for me to see that.
Oh, one thing I might definitely need to bring up as well is that the quotable Red Dwarf. Completely forgot there. There's one of my one of my favourite kind of gags is when all the way at the start where Lister talks about going condom fishing, and the goes, yeah, £2 black rib nobbler, which gets called back by the cat later on as well. I should have done
my research. I wonder if there is such a condom as the black ribbed nobbler. And I do not want to use my work PC to search for that.
New incognito tab open, sir.
Are you actually doing that live?
You'll still find out.
Good. Right, get it looked at. I'm glad it's you, black-ribbed nobbler. I might get one if they exist.
Obviously, everything that comes up is Urban Dictionary because of Red Dwarf. Red Dwarf, Red Dwarf, Red Dwarf, Red Dwarf.
I'm quite surprised no one's made one on Etsy.
Do you get artisan condom makers? There's a fucking line on Etsy, surely. And maybe that line is black ribbed nobblers.
Artisan condom makers is something I never thought I'd hear today.
Yeah, you did. You're podcasting with me.
So sorry, I can't find any. I apologise.
No black ribbed nobbler for me, Devoed.
We'll see.
If anyone listening knows of any, Mark would really like to have
fucking cancelled because I can't get a black ribbed nobbler.
You should have gone fishing in Liverpool.
No, I'm all right,
We come
thanks.
full circle.
There's sometimes lockdown's a good
We
thing.
come full circle. Had I made that choice, I could have gone canal fishing.
You could have gone canal fishing for black-ribbed nobblers.
Then my life would have completely changed.
Before we wind it up, is there anything we've missed that you wanted to talk about, Kurt?
I don't think so. I think we've covered everything. I thought, there's a lot to talk about, and I think we've covered it well, and I think we've done it justice, really. So I think, all in all, problems aside, I think it's a pivotal moment in Red Dwarf's history.
I agree. Anything other than black-ribbed nobblers that you wanted to talk about, Matt?
Yeah, there's very, very briefly, on the fandom wiki for this episode, Red Dwarf, there's a section here which goes, possibly unintentionally, Robert Llewellyn's alternative dimension character Bongo bears a striking resemblance to Dean Stockwell's character Al Calavici of Quantum Leap fame. Al's character in Quantum Leap was nicknamed Bingo in his youth, which was a shortened form of Bingo Bango Bongo. And considering I think Quantum Leap is in my all-time top 5 shows, if anything Quantum Leap referenced, I need to mention it. But I think it's a bit of a leap. But,
a leap. You see what I did there? I fucking love Quantum Leap as well, mate. Let's not talk about Quantum Leap. We'll just start a new fucking podcast.
I did reference Quantum Leap. I went reference Quantum Leap.
Don't.
It must have been on the most recent WandaVision, I think, episode. I think I referenced it.
Yeah, you did.
I did, didn't I? Yeah.
I was on it, and you marked me out. Yeah.
I marked you out.
Shut me gob, though.
Marked you out.
You did.
But yeah, I don't think it was. I mean, because I think Robert Llewellyn's, Bongo was quite conservatively dressed in comparison to Rear Admiral Calavici.
Yeah.
But
I think it's pushing it, but as coincidences go, it's quite cool.
Yeah.
And for me, the only thing I wanted to mention other than what we've covered is I've always been a fan of having a tweak of the theme tune, and we get a Hammond organ version of the Red Dwarf theme at the end of this episode, and that made me smile. That made me smile quite a lot. I love stuff like that. So, before we disappear, Kurt, where can people find you on the internet?
Online on Twitter at rmuldrake, RMULDRAKE. Watch me talk, listen to me even, talk about Star Trek, about WandaVision, about the X-Files, about Millennium, and about various other things. So, at rmuldrake. Today, I'm not going to go in any more depth than that.
Matt, what about yourself?
you can find me on Twitter with xanmat or zanmat, and but just randomly talking about other random stuff. But you can also listen to my podcasts, which is Pick a Disc, which you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook under the username Pick a Disc, where I talk to someone about an album they've picked for whatever reason they want to.
Good stuff. I think I'm going to do the same as Kurt this time. I am on many, many podcasts, but for the time being, you can follow just me at MarkAdamsHC on both Twitter and or Instagram. Although I'm not fond of Instagram, it's like Twitter on hard mode. So thank you very much for listening to Shipwrecked and Comatose. And until next time, smoke me a kipper. I'll be back for breakfast.
Smoke me a heck. I'll be back for heck.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you've just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
The giddy carousel of pop.
We find ourselves in the Hammersmith Odeon with Dave Rimmer. He's backstage, deep in the murky bowels of the Odeon. All is not well, writes Dave. Somebody has got the Gap band's trousers mixed up in their dressing room. Charlie, one of the three Wilson brothers, who are the nucleus of the Gaps, holds up a silvery sequined pair of strides that no sane human being would be seen dead in. "These aren't my shingles," he exclaims disgustedly. "These are Robert's." He throws them down.
It's the fact that they call them the missing Baco foil kecks.
That's what really made me laugh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and spangly combat gear. So there's a kind of, the fashion correspondent is working overtime.
We Buy Records.
We're now officially in the sunlit uplands of post-Brexit sovereign Britain. So we thought it might be fun to sort of take a tour around those sunlit uplands of post-Brexit sovereign Britain and see how that relates to buying and selling records. Because it's going to be good, right? They had four years to sort of figure it out.
Let's stay positive and hope that all of the emails we've had on the subject are positive, shall we?
We dig music.
The Instrumentals album, they almost do work as meditations. It's more music that I can add to my sad yoga core genre.
Oh, I tell you what, right? I messaged Colin about this earlier because this is the first time I got to the Instrumentals. But considering you hate noodly nonsense, this is noodly f***ing nonsense. Like, how long is that first
nonsense.
track?
The thing is, they were improvised tracks.
You can tell.
Yeah.
Like, not in a. I'm not saying that in a negative way because she's a fantastic player. But if you were to look up self-indulgent in a dictionary, this would be one of the pictures.
Yeah, we've both picked up on this. You are never, ever, ever, ever allowed to complain about something being noodly again.
Okay,
Nope.
I promise.
Because this is the definition of it. And it's great. We like noodly stuff.
Yeah.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.